morning. Sorry, good afternoon. Geez, I've had a horrible week. Welcome everyone to the Hot Politics Lab. It's good to see so many people we don't often see, so that's great. Welcome. We have a great speaker today, Constantine Boussalis. I've been misspelling your name since 2017, Constantine. I'm sorry for that. It's not with an R, it's double S. This also explains why I can never find you on Twitter, by the way. Constantine is an assistant professor at Trinity College and has a range of publications on quite diverse topics. Environmental politics is a big thing he's publishing on. I also saw some really interesting stuff that I was unfamiliar with published in Social Science and Medicine. So I know Constantine from, let's call it the text analysis world. And I think he's doing some really exciting work there. And then I don't know, a year ago, little more than a year ago, I assume, I was in Dublin, and Constantine and I talked about this project of his where they were analyzing, essentially doing emotion recognition using different modalities on German election debates. And that's what he will be presenting today. Super exciting topic. And yeah, for those of you who are new here, Constantine will talk for about 20 minutes. Then we'll have the Q&A. You will write questions as participants into the Q&A box, which is below in the middle, the two balloons. And then Bert will read them out to you. Okay, Constantine, without further ado, I want to give you the floor.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here. Presenting at the Hot Politics Lab. I know that myself and my co-authors are really looking forward to your feedback as well. As Heis mentioned, this is a project that we've been working on, myself and Travis Cohen from Exeter, Mira Holman from Tulane, and Stefan Mueller from UCD here in Dublin. This is something that we've been working on. It's a bit based on a paper that Travis Cohen and I had published last year, where we're looking at U.S. elections. As I'll talk in a second about, there's some features of those results that really we want to pursue further, and especially specifically the gendered aspect of emotion responses from voters. I guess let's just get started. So the motivation for this paper, well, we know that televised debates are central events in many democratic systems, and it's increasingly so over time. And we also know that verbal, as well as, and here's where we're coming in, a nonverbal emotional expression in campaigns matter. We argue, and I think that we're probably preaching to the choir here, but we argue that emotions matter in politics, and that leaders actually will use these emotions strategically, especially based on the literature, especially anger and happiness, when they are presenting themselves to the electorate via these debates. And so, but there's another wrinkle here, which is that, especially theoretically, we would expect that emotions are not actually equally acceptable from all candidates, because voters will apply different expectations based on candidate gender. There's probably other dimensions as well, but in this paper we are looking at gender specifically. So women candidates, politicians, will employ their emotions strategically. They are aware of this, and we argue they will employ emotions strategically. And voters will react positively to the strategic use of emotions. And so in this paper, we are relying on an amazing data set of German debates. So we are studying the the universe of cases of televised German debates that have women candidate or women candidates in them. So specifically, it's 2005, 2009, 2013, 2017 with Angela Merkel, and there's also a minor party debate with 2 female candidates in 2017 that we're studying. So just a little bit of theory here. when we as voters are choosing political leaders, we argue voters will incorporate candidates' emotional expressions when they're making evaluations of how acceptable these candidates are. And what voters really want is they want leaders to be strong, but also they don't, like we say here, they don't want psychopaths. So it's great for a leader to express strength, but there's probably some tipping point after which this person is probably not stable and shouldn't lead us. And well, we can debate as to the actual external validity of that based on experience, but there's significant literature to support this. So what this suggests, the implications here is that this limits the range of acceptable emotions leaders can express. And things like anger and happiness are okay, but things like sadness or fear, for instance, are generally unacceptable, right? So candidates will be punished if they were to express those. Again, that added layer here is that, well, these expectations aren't equal for all candidates, right? And so based on socialization of voters, we expect them to treat emotive displays from female candidates, women candidates, and male candidates differently. So gender role congruity theory argues that men and women are socialized into different roles. And there's this one kind of famous motto in this literature, getting ahead versus getting along. And so women are socialized to be more caring and communal. That's the one kind of set of expectations that we have, or that people in general we would expect to have based on socialization. And then men are more independent, or we would say agentic. These roles include constraints on levels and types of emotions. So from these theories, we derive a set of hypotheses. First is that women who are seeking leadership roles understand these constraints, and they will express their emotions consistent with both the leadership role, again, where we expect kind of a balance between what we, technically is called hedonic and agonistic expressions, and also gender role, right? That they would expect to be more communal. And so voters will reward, we also expect that voters will recognize this and they will reward them for congruent behavior. So the first set of, here we have kind of candidate and voter level hypotheses. Women seeking office will express more happiness than will men, and men will express more anger than will women. That's on the candidate side. And then on the voter side, we expect voters will reward women's happiness and punish their anger relatively to men's expression of happiness and anger. Women are assumed to feel and express a broader set of emotions, right? So here we're interested in just the level of emotiveness. And so we expect that women will express more emotions overall compared to men, but on the voter side, we're not quite sure, basically, theoretically, like the theory is a little bit, not a little bit, it is ambiguous here in our reading. So, we could expect voters will react positively or negatively to emotional expression by women compared to men. So getting to the research design, let me just see how we're doing on time. I think I'm doing okay. What do we do here? Well, we're focusing on those debates that I mentioned. So we downloaded them most of them from YouTube. There's also one from C-SPAN, and we did some stuff to it to make it more German. We then extract these frames, and then we pass each of these frames to the Microsoft Face API, which we don't have the actual, we don't know kind of the secret sauce underneath this in this API, but we're almost positive that this is a convolutional neural network. What that does is it produces confidence scores for 8 emotions. We focus in our study on anger and happiness. But then, as Heis mentioned in the introduction, we're not just looking at facial expressions. We're also interested in the multimodal aspect of emotive displays. And this we believe is a strength of the paper as well. So what we do is we take the sound and we calculate the candidate vocal pitch, and we proxy this as the, and this is used as a proxy for emotional intensity. And then we also take the transcripts and we apply a sentiment dictionary to it to get the sentiment of the utterances as well. So combining all of this data, we bring it with, we combine it with focus group participant data. So the greatness of this data set is that for each of these debates, there were subjects who were watching this debate live in a focus group, and we're providing continuous response measure data on how much they liked or disliked the candidates as they were watching the debate. So when we combine all this data, then we can test the two levels of hypotheses, the voter level and the candidate level. I think I'm just going to kind of skip over kind of the modeling section here, but absolutely we can discuss further in Q&A. Okay, so moving along, so basically we pass all these frames to the Microsoft Face API, and it returns these scores. I guess because this is a technical lab, we should probably talk a little bit about validation. So can we trust what the Face API is actually returning to us? And we take this question seriously, and we recruited some research assistants, and we put together an interface here using Labelbox, and we randomly sampled 5-second clips from the videos that we were studying. And we asked the respondents basically to give us to score on a Likert scale the level of emotion that they see, specifically anger and happiness or any emotion. And based on the pilot, we were pretty happy. A pilot of 75 gave us a Kerpendore's alpha of 0.81. And here are the results of the validation. So there's kind of two levels of validation here. We weren't, we weren't quite sure exactly how we want to do this, but so I guess more is better. First is just a comparison between the continuous variable and this 5-point scale. The continuous variable being the prediction of from the model. And so out of sample performance with a 5-fold repeated cross validation gave us root mean squared error of 0.82. And that's for happiness, and 1.03 for anger. And so that means that, well, predictions are within less than a point on this 1 to 5 scale, this Likert scale that we're asking, which we think is pretty good. But we can also look at this in a different way, like a classification performance question. And so here we recoded this 5-point Likert scale to a dummy, 1 being very much or extremely on that scale, or 0 otherwise, and we fit a logistic regression classifier. Again, examine held out model performance with 5-fold repeated cross validation, and we're pretty satisfied. We got an F1 score for happiness of 0.95, and also similarly reduced accuracy in general here, but F1 for anger, 0.77. But again, we're pretty happy with the validation. We can discuss also, let's see, how much time do I have? Maybe in the Q&A also we can discuss kind of the inherent biases of these algorithms on, basically there's kind of, there's evidence to suggest that like white men are classified much better than darker toned humans, and there's evidence to suggest that darker women are classified much worse, right, relative to white men. There's less of a problem, I guess, if we're going to call it this, less of a problem between white men and white women relative to darker toned people. But we can discuss this in Q&A if someone likes. But I just want to throw that out there as well, that these things, these biases do exist. Okay, just very quickly, another type of validation that we had, we just relied on existing human codings from the original studies of these, of using these data. And in there, humans had coded whether there was smiling in a given second. And so we compared the Microsoft Face API predictions to these human codings. And again, we found pretty solid correlation here. So getting to the actual results, what we see here is, well, the first is just looking at anger and happiness displays for Merkel versus her male opponents across all the debates. And just descriptively, we can see that the males were probably, not probably, it looks like they were more angry than Merkel throughout. But with the happiness, it's a little bit ambiguous, right? There are points where Merkel's more happy versus Schroeder, but less happy, or maybe equally with the other competitors. Well, we can actually model this, and what we find is that yes, like when we include all the debate, all the data from all the debates, we see that Merkel was less likely to had a lower average confidence score in anger relative to her competitors. There's no real difference in happiness or a non-neutral display, so any emotion. But we also see that Merkel displayed lower vocal intensity than her male competitors. Okay, so that's on the candidate side. Now moving to the results on the voter side, what we find is generally consistent with our theoretical expectations. We see that for two of the debates, Angela Merkel was punished for her anger displays, and conversely, these results are Angela Merkel versus her male opponent. That's what these effects are. And so conversely, then men are rewarded for their anger displays relative to Merkel. We also see that Angela Merkel was rewarded for her happiness displays relative to her male opponent. We also see rewards for higher emotive vocal displays, and also positive sentiment for Angela Merkel relative to her male opponents. We also looked at just emotions in general, if you recall that hypothesis, and we see that for almost all of the debates, she is rewarded for her for any emotion, any facial display, any emotive facial display. And in these models, we see generally similar effects for the vocal and for the and for the sentiment of her utterances. Now, we have also a validation, robustness check here. Just very quickly, if you recall, I mentioned that there was a minor party debate in 2017. Here we had 5 candidates, 2 of them being women. Interestingly, we have one of the women is on the far right, the AfD, and the other woman is on the far left in Die Linke. So there's also kind of an interesting kind of balance there in terms of we have both extreme candidates. What we see is a pattern that's very similar to the results from Angela Merkel. So we see that these female candidates relative to their male opponents displayed less anger, no difference, no statistically significant difference in happiness or any emotion, but also they were less likely to have a heightened vocal pitch relative to their male counterparts. And also on the voter reaction side, we see generally a similar pattern. Their anger, they were punished for their anger displays. We don't see any difference in the rewarding or punishment for happiness, but again, they're rewarded for heightened vocal pitch and more positive sentiment. We don't see any difference in how voters reacted to any emotion, but in those models, again, we see the same thing for vocal and verbal displays. So in conclusion, on the candidate emotion side, so for candidates, we see that, well, in the Merkel data, we see that Merkel expresses far less anger than her male opponents, but no real difference in terms of happiness. And we also see that results were consistent with emotional displays in this minor debate between those 2 female candidates. On the voter reaction side, Voters tend to reward male candidates for expressions of anger. They rewarded Merkel for her happiness displays. They rewarded Merkel generally for her emotional expressions. And so the overall conclusion then is that emotions, again, preaching to the choir here, but emotions in debate seem to matter. We also say here that they're reported in the news. In an appendix in our paper, we did a content analysis, and we saw that the German press actually does report on, following a debate, does report on the emotions displayed by the candidates. And also we argue, and we find here that Merkel's use of emotions, and we argue her use of emotions is largely successful. All right, so that's all I have for you. I'm looking forward to questions and answers.
Yes, thanks, Constantine, for this very interesting and engaging talk. Those of you in the audience, the idea is that you ask questions to Constantine right now. You can do this by typing your question in the Q&A box, and then I will read them out loud and Constantine will answer them. While you're thinking about your question, Constantine, maybe a question for clarification a little bit, and it actually relates to the conclusions you draw here. But can you say a little bit more about the effects and the extent to which emotions matter here? So they reward, and so how important, how big are these effects that we see here?
Right, that's obviously a great question. Let's see here. So I would have to recall now. These are on a dial. So they are from the dial, I believe, is, you put me on the spot here, and I should know my substantive effects, but it's basically, it's a 7-point scale. So we're talking here like effects like 0.75 on a 7-point scale, basically.
So how would you characterize that, as small or big or somewhat in the middle?
Yeah, so I mean, this is really interesting data, right? So the data, I mean, think about what's involved here. You have respondents that have this dial, right? And it's actually, the actual what's going on is they're asked to, we didn't come up, this is great data and we're not complaining, but they're actually asked to evaluate what they're hearing, whether that means that they're more likely to support one candidate or the other. That's really what they're doing here. And so there's a little bit of a cognitive load there, and we wouldn't expect that that this would be the least noisy data out there, right? And so, given all of that, right, we would still say that that these effects are substantive. I'm seeing here that the standard deviation of the 1 to 7 dial is around 1, so it's not like they're switching from the extremes all the time, right? But that gives you a sense of a little bit of what this effect size is.
Yeah, no.
So
I'm definitely convinced of the
standard deviation.
Yeah, I know that I'm definitely convinced of the effect sizes, but I think it is something we should be talking about, and in terms of the importance. I think there's right there a couple of questions here. Start with Luz Aldring from the VU University. Dear Constantine, thank you for your interesting talk. I really like the study. I have 2 questions. Well, let's do one at a time, Constantine. At the first slide, you state that women candidates employ emotion strategically. However, don't you think that male candidates also employ emotion strategically?
Yes, I think so. And I think the results, although we're looking at, the focus is on Angela Merkel, the results are relative to her male opponents. So the male opponents are rewarded for the anger displays that they would that they show, and so that is consistent with the gender role theory expectations that we have, that men are socialized to take on a role of, being strong, aggressive, and that they are not rewarded for, an incongruent display there.
Yes, okay, thanks. The second question from Luz. To what extent are the effects that you show real effects based on gender, or are they Anglo-American effects?
Yeah, so this is a great question. And this is something that that was constantly coming up when we were doing this study. So we were fortunate enough, so let me give a little bit of background here. In the paper that was published in last year in Political Communication with myself and Travis Cohen, we did a somewhat similar study, although it didn't have this wide multimodal aspect to it, but we were focusing on these facial displays of emotion. And it was on one of the primary debates, Republican Party primary debates in the 2016 election. And on the stage, there were, it was all men. If memory serves, it was something like 8 candidates. I don't remember exactly, but it was a large number of candidates. And then there was one woman, Carly Fiorina. And what we found was that she was punished. Again, we were working with focus group participants that were watching it live at the time. She was punished for basically any emotive display. So happiness, anger. So that was kind of what signals. So we're like, okay, there's something odd going on here with the female candidate. Now let's look at, let's see if we can find comparable data out there. And we came across this Merkel data. Now, but it's not just the Merkel data. We should stress here that we were fortunate also to have this data for the minor party debates. And so here we had 2 women candidates, and again, and kind of across the political spectrum also, right? Far left, far right. And we see again this effect. So, I mean, clearly this is a case study, right? Like we would say it's like a special case study, but we are not making claims that we still can't make claims like that. This is, it's over, right? And that this is settled. But we'd say that if we're starting to triangulate, we'd probably say that there's something going on here. And we're also relying on very strong theory and also experimental research. So I'd say that, all right, there's a lot of internal validity, we argue, and we're starting to get there with the external validity. But this is a perfectly valid question, and it's something that we also we're struggling with.
Thanks, Constantine. Let's go to the next question from Patrick Stewart, University of Arkansas. This is some incredible research, very exciting. Major question I have regards to the audience responses to the interaction of capacity cues, such as physiognomy and body size, and display behavior. Could you speak to the intersection of gender, physiology, and emotion signaling?
Yeah, so first of all, Dr. Stewart, we haven't met, but I'm very familiar with your research, and so thank you for the question. This is like, so basically in the literature on nonverbal communication, one way to look at this is that it's split between basically characteristics that are static, right? And then you have dynamic characteristics. There's probably a better way to explain this. And so we're only in this dynamic. We're only working in this dynamic area here. So we're looking at so we're not just looking at morphological features, right? Like attractiveness, etc. And we don't control for them. And so we can't really, if I understood the question, we can't really speak to this, right? So and also we don't have really that much data either here to work, to compare to compare female candidates in this kind of context across kind of that spectrum on those dimensions. So unfortunately, we can't really speak to that, but that would be somewhere that we would definitely want to work, like moving forward, absolutely. But this is, there's a lot of evidence also suggesting that voters react to morphological features of candidates, and they make their evaluations based on that. And we just can't speak to that part of the literature, unfortunately.
All right, next question. Tobias Rohrbach, super interesting project and design. Could you talk a bit more about your outcome variables? Do you think these punishment reward patterns are consistent across different outcomes? In other words, competence, warmth, assessments versus vote choice, etc.?
Yeah, so again, the confidence, the outcome variable is this 7-point dial. And as I mentioned, again, it's just how, as you're listening, do you support one candidate versus or support the other candidate? That's all we're working with here. So we can only speculate as to exactly what these evaluations, other than just the stated instructions, what the candidate or what the voters are thinking there, like what. In other words, if I understand the question correctly, like on what, in what dimension, right, of the evaluation are they making that choice? It's not clear, I guess, is my answer to that. So, yeah, I hope that doesn't really satisfy. No, but it's not quite clear as to how, if I understood the question correctly, it's not quite clear as to what. What feature of the candidate are they evaluating on? But we do know that things like warmth or competence, they map onto like kind of global evaluations, right? So we know that from the literature, right? So, but we just don't know specifically, it's like here for a given candidate what's going on, or for a given voter rather.
Yep, thanks. Next question is from Matthijs Rodan. Thank you, Constantine. This is a great study. What I like particular is the very rich research design. Question, in addition to the robustness checks, to what extent would you argue the focus on Merkel makes it a very conservative test? Not because Merkel is ideologically conservative, but because of her conservative approach towards displaying emotions at all. And I kind of want to second that question. I've once been to a meeting of the CDU-CS this was early, like sort of 2008, 2009. She's incredibly shy.
Right.
And even at a party gathering, she had to be helped a little on the stage to feel comfortable, and so yeah, I think it's a good question, Matthijs.
Yeah, so this is an excellent question. So yeah, like that is one thing also that we were kind of looking at. I think it's also like outside the party headquarters. At one point, they had this huge display, and it was her with her classic, like the way she puts her hands together, and it's just like this classic, like kind of Zen balanced kind of persona. And that's something that we, that does, when we think about Angela Merkel, that we think about that. So a couple things on this. That actually would be one way to think about, right? And what's interesting with the data, we saw like an interesting evolution. Actually, we were able to track kind of the emotive display, like the evolution of her emotive displays over time as well. And what we see is that in the first debate, she was actually very emotional. And then as time went on, right, you started to see this kind of dissipate on some of the dimensions. So like on some of the modes. So in particular, the one that comes to mind right now is her vocal her vocal displays. So it kind of became flat over time. Now, is that, there's also the new questions that arise there, right? Is this an age thing, or is this an experience thing? Is this she's been an incumbent forever thing? But that's, I think, for future research or other research. The one thing, though, is that clearly we're focusing on, and we say it in the paper, that this is, the most powerful woman in the world. And so she's also this very interesting case study in and of itself. And so, yeah, like there is one way to look at this. She's the least likely case for finding emotion effects. And so the fact that we do find them is maybe surprising as well.
Yes. So conservative test. Anonymous attendee has a question for you. Thank you for the great talk. Very interesting. The DV on the voter level is measured with a questionnaire, if I understood it correctly. How do you think response bias has an effect on this? Do you think this study could have benefited from neurophysiological measurements at the voter level?
I'm sorry. So
if you press on the Q&A button, you can also read the question with me.
Yes. Let me actually, if everyone can bear, here we go. So Q&A, yes. Well, in fact, no. The voter level dependent variable is from this continuous response. It's a continuous response measure coming from this dial that the respondents were turning right and left as they were watching the debate. So it's not it's not like, well, it is, I guess it is self-report. It is, yes. Yeah, I forgot that I'm talking to the Hot Politics lab here. They are kind of self-reporting, absolutely live, but it's not direct observation. Now, absolutely, like if we could, who knows, Hot Politics lab, but like, if you can wire people up and absolutely like measure responses directly, that would only enrich the this research project, absolutely. And I think that there's definitely valuable research to be done here, and other things too, like eye tracking, for instance, etc.
Yes.
So I guess I could.
No, I'll read the question out loud, and then you can just read along, just so that we keep the structure
yes, of course,
that we are used to. The next question is from Isabella Ribasso. Hi, Constantine. Thanks for a lot for your talk. It raised two questions for me, but I'm not sure if you've looked into these things. Let's start with the first question. First, have you used your transcripts to look into the target of emotions? I would imagine that the SPD candidate's anger is targeted at the incumbent, Merkel herself, but if Merkel expresses anger, what is it about?
Yeah, so no kind of deeper natural language processing to the text, but absolutely this would be fascinating. There are other parts of the text too that, so what we do is that's a great question. What we do though is we do have some context in that we control for the topic of discussion, and those topics also were coded based on how gendered they are, right? So these masculine or more feminine topics based on kind of theory. But we don't have kind of these more deeper things like blame or target of sentiment, and we know that voters do probably react to these things, and so that would be an interesting extension, which is these the multimodal nonverbal displays interacted maybe with kind of more context in the actual debate. Another thing, even just a simpler thing that we were thinking about was just the interaction of the topic of discussion with these displays, because there's significant you know, there's a lot of literature also about congruency, like how congruent the displays are with what is being said. And this has been studied in the past. And so we wanted to, you know, at some point we want to look at this further as well. But we've got the topic and the sentiment of the text. We just don't have this kind of added layer of rich detail, which is kind of where, you know, if it's an attack, which way, etc.
Yeah, no, I think, just picking up on it, I think it would be interesting to see to what extent the expression, like psychologists and neuroscientists seem to these facial displays as a way of a sort of signaling. And so if the sentiment in the text is aligning with what people are signaling, or if these are unaligned, you know, that's something that we at least are interested in at the moment. And I think that's something that your data could speak to. Let's go to the second question of Isabella. So second, if I understood correctly, in Germany, there are two types of debates between the two candidates for the chancellor, CDU, SPD, and among the smaller parties. Do you find differences in emotionality between these two types of debates?
Yes, so we have two different types. Absolutely, that's correct. Nothing comes to mind, like I don't recall us actually looking at the average differences in emotionality across these two debates. But I don't think that there was, like, just recalling the descriptive statistics in my head right now and like working with the data, I don't recall any major differences. And even just looking at the video also, there might have been a little bit more anger in the minor debates, but that's I'm not quite sure. But it would be marginal, I think. But this is something that we haven't looked systematically. We haven't actually tested across the two debates.
I have a question, Constantine. It's the end of the week, so maybe it's my memory. But what is the reason to zoom in on anger and happiness while you have information on these other emotions so I know anger and happiness are two well-studied emotions in political science, but things like disgust and sadness might probably have clear political implications, such as surprise also in a debate. So I'm wondering, is that something you want to do in a follow-up, or is there what was the reason to zoom in on these two, and is there any work planned on these other emotions that should also or could also matter?
Yeah, so these are great questions. So the first is that so one is that in the literature on nonverbal like political communication in this context, right? Debates, anger and happiness have been the kind of the central variables of interest based on theory of kind of hedonic and agonistic displays. But it's not that they have been studied exclusively, right? So in the past, others have also looked at things like fear, for instance. The issue here is that these, so for some of these emotions like fear, they're very rare, right? So the study that I can think of that goes the furthest back that I can recall is from the 1980s in the United States, and they looked at, if I remember correctly, they were looking at they were just trying to measure the emotional displays of Democratic primary candidates for president, and they found that fear displays were almost non-existent. And in our work on the Republican debates from 2016, we also found that fear was almost non-existent. So are political candidates strategic? Like, absolutely. Like, don't go on national television and have a fearful face, right? Like, that might be one of those first rules that they have. And it looks like that's the case. So for one set of emotions, like that's, you know, we not only are, you know, we have clear expectations also on the role expectations, but also on the gender expectations too, right? So On the gender role, we have in the gender role theory, right, literature, there's also a lot of emphasis on anger and happiness, right? And so that's also why we're focusing on these two emotions. Some of these emotions are non-existent. Others haven't been really validated that well either. And so it's also like a practical matter as well.
I give the word to Gijs, who I think also has a question.
One thing I want to say though is that we have run models on with all the other emotions, and we report them in our paper, but they don't come to mind. But I can pull them up.
Oh yeah, no, I think already, just putting that somewhere in appendix is something probably valuable information at some point. That's nice. Yeah.
Future research. Yes.
Lots more to work on. I think this is a really nice paper. I think it will be part of a set of papers that will ultimately drive political science away from Likert skills and other storytelling. I think this is really exciting stuff. And so congrats. Yeah, I have a lot of questions, but or maybe just comments, but I wanted to ask a practical question, and that's using the Microsoft Face API. So does it actually give you also values for the action units, or is it just an estimate of the discrete emotions?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the first part. So does it give us estimates of
the action units?
Oh, right. I see. No. So what you can return is you can return landmarks on the face, but it doesn't give you the actual, although the model from the literature that we could find, right, from Microsoft Research, it's clear that these models at some point, and maybe still, I would expect, are trained using facts. But it just gives us a confidence score for those, that output layer of the convolutional neural network. There's nothing like, it doesn't give us those action units so that we can maybe if I understand kind of where you're going with that, is it like that we can reconstruct, or we can come up with better, like more nuanced emotional displays based on the action units? No.
Yeah, I mean, at a minimum, I'd be interested in. I mean, the discrete emotion scores should be based, I presume, on the action unit scores. So
yeah,
I'd be interested in how they, in sort of the scores you need to have on particular action units to be described as angry.
There's probably like, I can only speculate, but there's probably room for research there in the hidden layers aspect of the CNN. But I don't, nothing on the output. Certainly, I mean, the documentation, again, we have to be very grateful to Microsoft for this product. It helped us a lot, but I mean, the documentation was just like, here's a confidence score on these emotions, period, done.
Okay, thanks.
There's a question from Carlos Rivera. You mentioned people of color. Do you think that people of color, and particularly women of color, would be punished for the display of emotions, particularly anger?
So on the theory side, I think that my co-authors would help me a little. They would know a little bit more than I would on the other dimensions of kind of the literature on race, for instance. So I don't have a very good answer for this, but certainly, as we mentioned here, there's gender effects. Like But from my reading, right, on race, I would say that that there is this there are similar dynamics. So, for instance, Black men in the United States, Black male candidates are don't want to, they understand that they shouldn't look more angry or than appropriate. So there are these types of constraints do exist. I mean, certainly anecdotally, and from my reading of the literature, that this is also something that exists. So if we were to then take this 2 by 2, right? If we're just looking at 2 races and two genders, yes, like Black women candidates do face significant burdens, right? Again, I mean, just think about the anecdotal kind of just accounts of women candidates also, just when they, the one that comes to mind is, I mean, it's going to sound weird, but, just go on YouTube and find Hillary Clinton on the Howard Stern show. For those of you who are Americans, Howard Stern's kind of this shock jock radio DJ, that's, long career, but she went on his show and she was talking about this, right, during the 2016 election, right, all the things that were going on in her mind, right, during the debate as to like how she should present herself, how she should react or not react to Donald Trump displaying those aggressive displays, right, hanging out in the background, encroaching on her space, like all these things are running through her mind in real time, right, and she's burdened by this calculus, something that male candidates don't have to deal with, and so if you add on the layer of race, we would expect similar or even a more pronounced effect. But again, I should know a little bit more about the race dimension, and I'm not giving a really good answer here.
Thanks, Constantine. I also have another question for you. That relates a little bit between what politicians show and the outcome that is happening. And so, some of my reading of this literature suggests that voters are not always great at per se recognizing specific discrete emotions in other people's faces. And so right now you're attributing this to anger, and it has a negative effect. This could be one way that indeed voters see the anger, or are they maybe seeing some sort of negative valence? And so are these effects now driven by anger or more a negative affectivity? I have a feeling your data cannot, this is beyond probably the project you're having here, but it has something to do with the mechanism which is underlying the effect that you see here, that because of anger there is this downstream outcome. But is it because of anger? And that might go back to the earlier question I asked you, maybe showing that the other negatively valenced emotions don't cause this effect might be partly able to show that it is anger and not just negative affectivity that people show that creates these effects.
I think that's an excellent question. Yeah, so our data are limited here, right? We can only rely on a few things here. First is our validation of the scores provided by the API. We had American research assistants, so they don't know what's being said. They're just reacting to the faces, and so that's kind of one channel, right? That basically our validation measures hopefully are not being polluted by maybe understanding of what's being said here. The other is that we control for the sentiment of the text. Now, it's not the best measure here, to be honest with you. There are all sorts of limitations on sentiment dictionaries, although this one is validated quite well on the German language. And so, you know, if you buy our sentiments score for $1, then like if you have any confidence in it, like we could say that, all right, we're controlling for valence a little bit in this way as well. You know, like absolutely, like that could be also a case here. I'm not going to say that that's not what's going on here. We can only rely on there might be something else that's escaping me right now, but those are the two that come to my mind that we're able to at least allay fears of this channel. But this is something that could happen as well. Absolutely, it's a great point.
I think I'm going to hand the floor to Gijs to round up.
Yeah, thanks, Constantine, for this presentation, and good luck with getting this book manuscript disguised as an article published. I think you'll spend a couple of years following down all the possible paths that have emerged from this project.
Thank you.
Yeah. Looking forward to seeing this in print. At this stage, we typically virtually give you the Hot Politics lab mug. I have one here, but it's in the dishwasher.
Next time I'm in Amsterdam.
Or when I'm in Dublin.
Absolutely.
or we see each other at some international conference. Thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you very much.
And let me briefly announce the upcoming talks for the next few weeks. Next week, we have Jana Krupnikov from Stony Brook University. Do we actually have an update on her topic yet, Bert?
I'm blanking. I don't know.
Okay. Then the week after, we have Michael Bruter going to talk about his most recent book, among other things, about how to design a voting booth during elections, a relevant topic here now in the Netherlands. And then the last week of February, we have no meeting due to a public holiday here in the Netherlands. Then March 5, we have Gerben van Kleef from the psychology department. And March 12, we have Ben Ruys, also from the psychology department, but the University of Leiden.
I do have an update on Jana's talk.
Oh,
so that's a follow-up paper from her recent HAPS paper with Erik Groenendijk on motivated reasoning. And if you haven't read that paper, you should probably read it. And so I'm sure the follow-up on the 2020 HAPS will be very important and exciting as well. So we'll hear about that next week, Friday.
Cool. Okay, sounds good. Really looking forward to seeing you all there. And if you don't have the time, you know, please you can listen to us on Spotify and watch us on YouTube as well. Okay, for now, have a good weekend and see you next week.